I had IBS. I had a terrible stomach growing up. Very sensitive stomach, felt my nerves in my stomach, and also had been on round after round of antibiotics.
I met our next guest at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference. Dr. Pedre is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and CEO of Happy Gut Life. His mission is to help people build their foundation of gut wellness to create total physical and mental well-being.
There was one really good study done at Stanford University. It wasn't a big cohort of people. It was about 18 in each group. They separated people into a high fiber diet versus a high fermented foods diet. And they were looking at 19 different inflammatory markers, including markers of cytotoxicity, stuff like that. And they found that if...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next Live Beyond the Norms episode. This is a health and longevity podcast. I met our next guest at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference. Dr. Pedre and I connected discussing my product at my company's booth, and pretty quickly, while coming to some understanding of Dr. Pedre's background and his book, The Gut Smart Protocol, it became obvious that I should have Dr. Pedre on my podcast. A little bit about Dr. Pedre. Dr. Pedre is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and CEO of Happy Gut Life. His undergraduate degree is from Cornell University. His MD is from the University of Miami. As you guys know, my audience, I love interviewing MDs who have kind of shifted into a functional space. He is the best-selling author of the books Happy Gut, that's one of them, and then the other one I've already mentioned, Gut Smart Protocol, Revitalize Your Health, Boost Your Energy, and Lose Weight in Just 14 Days with your personalized gut healing plan, which I've read, actually listened to, and it is an amazing book. His mission is to help people build their foundation of gut wellness to create total physical and mental well-being. Hopefully we can help him with that mission today. Dr. Pedre, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And by the way, I narrated my second book, so I hope you enjoyed that.
So before we get into your area of expertise, I like to go back. I actually like to go much further back. What was it like growing up, little Vincent? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? And if there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a doctor, an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, what or who would that be?
So I grew up in Miami, from Cuban immigrants that had actually arrived the year before from Puerto Rico. They had been out of Cuba since 1960, but had lived in other countries. And they arrived in Miami. My mom was 40 at the time and unexpectedly got pregnant and was not expecting a child. If you can imagine, this is 1972, you don't get pregnant at 40. And my mom just thought she was just like, was
done.
Weird. Like she could only eat cereal with milk in the morning, like cornflakes. And she was telling her friend from across the street, and she's like, do you think you could be pregnant? And she's like, no, there's no way I'm going to be pregnant at 40. Well, lo and behold, surprise.
Yep.
She was pregnant with me. I was a late surprise. The only boy in a family with all females, 2 older sisters, all female cousins. And, you know, growing up as an immigrant family, first speaking Spanish at home, we did not, in my early years, my grandmother was there. She didn't speak English. So Spanish was the primary language at home. And I actually didn't learn English until I was in pre-K. And so, you know, just regular immigrant conservative family, like making their way in a new country. But my dad actually, when I reflect back, because when I go back, all of my high school friends have a Latin accent, like a Cuban accent when they speak English. And I wondered, I don't know why I didn't hear it when I was in high school, but years later, I'm like, why does everybody have an accent? Well, my dad didn't have an accent because he went to boarding school in the middle of Florida. So my grandfather had decided that he wanted his son to learn English with no accent. So from Havana, flew to Florida and put my father in boarding school at the age of 8. And I think he went for multiple years. And somewhere I found the name of that boarding school, and it still exists to this day. It's like 100 plus years old. So my dad had no accent. So I think that's why I don't have a Latin accent when I speak English. I mean, sometimes you might hear a little thing here and there. And there were a lot of influences. Like my dad was super into, like by the 80s, he got very into supplements and followed like whatever natural health newsletter was mailed to the house, and was always like trying supplements and chewing garlic when he had a sore throat and telling me to chew garlic, and doing like food allergy testing. And at one point he put this thing on our refrigerator with a skull and crossbones, and had a list of all the fast food restaurants that we would eat at, like McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, that this is bad for us, that we should not be eating this. So there was that influence. And then there was my godfather, who was a pescatarian, did yoga, meditated, and talked a lot about Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy and all this. Now, growing up in a family that was Catholic, so and the funny thing is that my godfather was a bit of an anomaly in the family. He was kind of like a standout. Like nobody else was pescatarian, did yoga, meditated, and he would talk about that and how great it was. But my family's attitude and my parents was kind of like to joke about it and to kind of make fun of him. So as a child, you internalize that, but somewhere, some of that must have just trickled in, because by the time I was 21, I was trying to figure out how to conquer my fear of needles so that I could become a doctor. I had already been accepted to medical school, but I was afraid of needles. And the year
Even if
before,
you're on the operating end of the needle, was this just if you were receiving it, or also on the operating end?
oh, no, on the operating end as well. But receiving, I just did not like needles. I didn't like the smell of alcohol, like made me queasy. And all of that reality seeped in when I went from academia to thinking like, oh, wait a second, like this is about to become real. Like medicine is not just theory. Like I'm going to have to be in rooms with needles. I'm going to have to put needles in patients. I'm going to have to draw blood. All of that made me queasy. I would get dizzy, pass out. So at the age of 21, I started investigating, why is this happening to me? And it's almost ironic because honestly, the attitude in my family to my godfather was that he was this anomaly. We kind of made fun of him. He's strange. Yeah, he's interesting, but no, we're not gonna do that. And then at 21, I discover breathwork meditation and get into yoga as a means to conquer my fear of needles. And the more I get into it, the more I see how empowered I become, because the breathwork starts to not only help me with my needle phobia, but it also helped me conquer that monkey brain, that runaway, like worrying brain that was always thinking like 5 steps into the future, what was going to happen. And I started becoming much more present and in myself. So I always loved science, and I love the idea of the humanitarian idea of helping people. So combining science with that, I can't explain fully why, so going back to childhood, there was one, I hated the doctor. Not only did I feared doctors. My grandfather, my mom's dad, was a doctor in Cuba. He never left Cuba, and I never got to meet him. But one day I was sitting in the doctor's office. I don't know if I was with my mom waiting for me or for her. 7 years old. We're sitting in the doctor's office, and I just suddenly look up at my mom and I say, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. You know how kids sometimes do stuff like that?
Yeah.
But you probably don't, like, if the kid says, I want to be an astronaut, whatever. But when I said that, to my 7-year-old self, it felt like I was expressing a truth that was going to come to be. And of course, my mom loved the idea of me becoming a doctor because for her it was elegant, prestigious, respected, and I think also because her dad had been a doctor in Cuba. Interestingly, my mom didn't talk about her dad a lot. And it wasn't until, I'm going to say, 15 years ago that my aunt, my mom's sister, told me that my grandfather was into natural holistic medicine. And I did not know that. I'm like, why didn't no one ever tell me this? Because like, here I am, like, this is what I do. I'm in functional medicine. I'm in looking at root cause, using supplements, using more holistic remedies, nutrition. And I didn't know that it was in, sort of like in my bloodline.
That's awesome. So one question, I just want to touch on that because that's a really amazing story. So do you remember you're in the waiting room? What was it about that? Was it maybe, you think about a 7-year-old and it could be anything. It was like you saw a picture of a doctor on the wall. In my case, next to a Lamborghini. That's kind of my story, is a Lamborghini at 14, not 7. Or these people are waiting for that person, so he's super important. Or do you kind of remember what the heft that kind of led you to that decision?
I honestly, like telling the truth, it was an inner knowing. It was almost like just knowing that that's what I'm meant to do. And it had no logic to it because I feared doctors. And I did not enjoy being in doctors' offices, but that childhood experience of disliking the doctor's office and fearing doctors actually influenced the type of doctor I would become. And when I used to have an office, influenced the way my office was modeled and like remade, because I did a gut renovation on a space and made it feel like you were in a living room in a very warm space, not those white, sterile, or light gray walls that when you go into a hospital, or even like when I went to the pediatrician and the doctor's office. So I wanted I wanted people to feel when they walked through the door that they were home, that they can relax. I didn't want them to feel that fear and the lack of connection, the white coats. So very early in my career, after I had finished hospital and I was working in a private clinic, I actually took the white coat off and stopped wearing my white coat because I felt that it created a barrier between me and the patient. And if I wanted the patient to feel safe and trust me and be able to relate to me as a person that they can reveal things to, I wanted them to see me as an equal, not as some doctor with a white coat on a pedestal that is clinical, disconnected. I wanted to be human. So even in the hospital, when I used to do my rounds, at times I would sit on the patient's bed when I was talking to them, instead of, a lot of doctors, they hover over you and you're on the bed, and it's very intimidating. So I used to, if I had time in the morning when I would go round on my patients and visiting them, I would sit down on the bed with them.
So you're already wired a little bit different, right? Going in, you had to kind of do some parasympathetic work with deep breathing so that you could kind of get over this awareness of your fear of needles. That probably played out as you're going and getting your education. Now you're in practice. And so you graduated 1999, started functional medicine in 2014, right? So you got about 15 years.
2006
okay.
2006 was the first year that I went to their annual conference. And that was like a coming home. It was like finding the family that I had been looking for my entire career, because I felt like this weird, odd island by myself in a sea of regular doctors that didn't believe in anything outside of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. So as you just went to this event, was there something particular that attracted you to that event, right? Like, and then you felt at home. Obviously, that's why you stayed and like continued to practice that.
It was really like it took me about 6 months of research, like wondering, like, is this where I want to land? Functional medicine. At the time, it was either that or A4M. And finally, I just decided, like, this speaks to me. They had a conference on adrenal thyroid. And in one of the moments, we were at this, I think we were in California, and I was outside on a veranda that overlooked, like, I guess it was kind of high up and it looked out at I don't know if that was a golf course or something. And one of the lead founders of functional medicine, the doctor, came and stood next to me and said some really beautiful words that just made me feel like wow, I'm with the family now. Like this is the group of doctors that I've been looking for as mentors and what I want to do. I always looked up to Mark Hyman, Deepak Chopra, Andrew Weil. So a lot of what predates this is, yes, conquering the fear of needles with yoga, breath work, meditation. Concordantly at that time, because I finished college in 3.5 years and I had 8 months to prepare mentally for medical school, I started reading books by Deepak Chopra, Quantum Healing, Spontaneous Healing by Andrew Weil. And so 8 months later, when I started medical school and I had rewired my brain through meditation, there was nothing they could do or say that was going to like outdo or contradict the own internal experience that I had had. I knew the power that we have to heal ourselves internally, and that everything doesn't have to be drugs, including for anxiety, for mental health stuff. I've proven it many times in my life. And I'm saying, anybody who's listening and is on medication for mental health issues, like, I understand, like some people, it's hard. I was always kind of the type that if you can, the mind is something that you can actually mold into what you want it to be. That was my philosophy, and that's always been my philosophy.
So you've got this kind of focus on mind. Your first book, Happy Gut Life. Your second book, Gut Smart Protocol. I'm getting the sense we're going to talk about gut health today. Was that something you learned in medical school? How did you come to focus on the gut?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't think they even mentioned the gut microbiome during medical school.
Wow.
And the other interweaving story with this is I had IBS. I had a terrible stomach growing up. Very sensitive stomach, felt my nerves in my stomach, and also had been on round after round of antibiotics. So, I didn't know this at the time, nor did the doctors, but my immune system was shot. They kept saying that I was underweight. They tried putting me on these horse pill vitamins that were probably full of synthetic vitamins that are no better than expensive urine, and didn't say anything about my diet, about, how to reboot my immune system. There were moments as a teenager where I didn't respond to antibiotics, and they would have to take me in to get what was a pooled gamma globulin shot. So it pooled immunoglobulins from blood donors. So I used to go into the doctor when I didn't respond to an antibiotic for like a respiratory infection. And the minute they would give me the pooled globulins, other than passing out, by the next day, I felt like I had been given my immune system back. I always felt better. But no one was thinking that, wait a second, 80% of the immune system is all along the gut lining. Maybe there's an issue there. Why his immune system isn't behaving appropriately, and he's getting sick 2 to 3 times per year requiring antibiotics.
I certainly went through a period of time where I would get sinus infections, and I always knew they would give me amoxicillin, I think it was. And then I would like, okay, I will try these a couple times. Then I came to understand Z-Pak was actually the solution. And that went on for years. I haven't had any antibiotics. One, I would resist them aggressively, right? Like as I would have to be pretty egregiously bad in order to really convince me to take them now, just because of what I know. But I just haven't needed them, right? Like you like get your immune system and your gut health in the right place, and it's so much better now.
We have such a fear of infections and things like one thing I learned. So in between, before I discovered functional medicine, I trained in medical acupuncture, and I started doing acupuncture on myself along with treating patients with acupuncture. And one thing that I learned and discovered is that you can put a needle through the skin without using an alcohol swab, and you don't cause an infection. Now, these are acupuncture needles that are actually just going in and separating the tissue, different from like an injection needle that's actually breaking through the tissue. So there, yes, you need alcohol, but you don't necessarily need alcohol for acupuncture needles. And I've done so many times on myself and never gotten an infection with it and not used alcohol.
Yeah, so we do have this kind of fear of infections, and then that causes actually us to take antibiotics, and
And
then now
the
we don't have the
overuse
defense
of
system.
the overprescribing of antibiotics, the overuse, it's infiltrated not just the medical schooling and teaching, but it's also infiltrated the collective consciousness of people thinking like, oh, just give me an antibiotic to knock out this viral infection that doesn't need an antibiotic.
I will always remember visiting one, doc in the box, so probably attached to a Walgreens or something, and the doctor or physician's assistant or whatever level they need to be at that location was like, listen, I'll give you, you're probably going to be fine, like it's 10 days for a virus, right? You'll probably be fine, but I'm going to give you this prescription anyway, which is like not, in my opinion, it's what everybody wants, but it's not the right thing to do. It's like, come back in
Yeah.
3 days or whatever it is. And I was like, I intentionally decided not to take them that time. Sure enough, 3 days later, at the 10-day mark, it was over. And so now I just wait 10 days anytime that I might get something. And it is just it's always gone. Like I haven't had antibiotics in years. And it's just this, this mindset of overprescribing. Now, in your book, you talk about endotoxins, and it's a kind of a topic I haven't really touched on too much. So I wanted to, what are endotoxins? What impact do they have on us?
Yeah, it's a funny name because endotoxins come from gram-negative bacteria that live inside our large intestine. And they thought initially that they were toxins that were released when the bacteria died. So thus the name endo, inside toxin. But later on, we learned that these bacteria actually secrete these endotoxins. So another name for it is LPS, or lipopolysaccharide. And endotoxins like LPS from gram-negative bacteria like E. coli get across the gut barrier, and they are one of the most potent activators of the immune response through a pathway called a toll-like receptor. So they bind to these receptors on the surface of white blood cells, and when they do, they tell that white blood cell, hey, there's an invader, it's time to attack, send signals out to the other white blood cells, recruit more white blood cells, and tell the body that is under attack and that we need to increase inflammatory signals. But it turns out that there are actually receptors to this endotoxin in other body tissues, for example, muscle, liver, and even brain, the hypothalamus. And in all those places, when endotoxin binds, it causes a cascade that turns on internal inflammatory signals. So they've done studies where they've seen that the influx of endotoxin, which can happen after like a fatty meal, especially like a saturated fat meal, and depending on what's in the meal, that the rise of endotoxin precedes the rise in insulin resistance, that then eventually leads to weight gain, that eventually leads to potential diabetes. So there's this direct correlation between endotoxin inflammation, weight gain, obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes.
So, I recently interviewed Dr. Gundry, and he talks about LPSs. He's funny. He was like, I normally don't cuss, but I call them little pieces of shit. And in his book, The Gut Brain Paradox. And one of the things that he kind of prescribes, quote unquote prescribes, is more exposure to LPSs. Now, I think it's in a different context. He's like, hey, don't overly wash your fruit. Like the dirt, the maybe fragments of LPSs actually teach your immune response. How does that land with you?
Yeah, I think it's a little out there because LPS across the board is going to be an inflammatory stimulus. And if there's anything that's wrong in our society is that people can't shut off inflammation internally, and that's why we have so much chronic disease. The LPS is not a problem if your gut border is healthy. The healthy gut lining is going to keep that LPS out. The reason that getting exposed to, like dirt on organic vegetables is you're getting those soil-based bacteria that actually have a lot of really powerful properties, including something called quorum sensing, where they're able to sense each other and create a community. And they also produce these antimicrobial peptides that kill off other bad bugs. I almost look at them and I use them with patients as if they are like little mini bots producing targeted antimicrobials like antibiotics that are not going to affect you systemically, but they're going in and they're killing off bad bugs in the gut. So I can't say that I agree with Dr. Gundry's
Well,
philosophy there.
I think you just said the one caveat, which is if you have taken care of your leaky gut,
Yeah.
then they actually provide this kind of feedback loop, right? Because I know he talks about
But
quorum
it's
in it.
not it's not because of the LPS, it's because of the other things that they're doing and the cross feeding, because these soil-based organisms, some of them they produce very important postbiotic products like short chain fatty acids like butyrate, but other short chain fatty acids that help support other good bugs in the gut, so they help increase diversity in the gut.
Yeah, so it's probably my misinterpretation that is the problem here. Let's be let's be realistic. So everything kind of is relating to leaky gut. I think you describe it as the most misunderstood health issue of our time. What is leaky gut? What tends to cause it? What can we do? Kind of super fit. Hey, on day one, here's some strategies to help you manage leaky gut.
Yeah, first of all, to understand, our gut is a semi-permeable membrane that needs to allow nutrients to come through. Right, so there is a certain level of leakiness to the gut. The problem is when the gut becomes too leaky. So it's kind of like Goldilocks. It has to be just leaky enough, but not too leaky. And the minute it becomes more leaky, and a lot of this happens through the loosening of the connections between the cells, we call them the tight junctions. They're kind of like this Velcro protein scaffolding structure that holds the cells together. And when that loosens up, it creates holes that then are going to allow substances or things to inflammatory things like LPS to cross the border without some sort of stopgap that happens when things are going through the cell membrane where it's being controlled, what's being absorbed and what's being kept out. And also, once you're getting a breakdown of the tight junctions, you're also getting a breakdown of the mucus layer of the gut, which is kind of like, think of it like a moat around the castle. The mucus layer is the first order of defense that helps keep and protect the gut lining. And there's something that people do every day that's destroying the mucus layer and they don't even realize it.
What is that?
It's drinking coffee, like getting a coffee in a to-go cup lined with plastic and then heated with the hot liquid, drinking those microplastics that are getting released from the inside of the cup. They've now done studies looking at the effects of microplastics on the mucus layer and on the gut lining, and the microplastics go in and they disrupt the mucus layer. So it's like you're disrupting the protective moat around the castle, and the next thing is the castle wall starts to fall apart.
all because of your morning cup of coffee. I did see you did an interview with Wendy Myers, and I think it was almost entirely on microplastics, which are, I think coming to the forefront as a problem. And so you're talking microplastics interrupting the mucus layer kind of involved with these tight junctions.
Yeah, exactly. And the microplastics also in some studies showing that they actually cause the overgrowth of bad bugs in the gut. So they're disrupting the gut microbiome, shifting it towards a more unfavorable microbiome. When you get more of these inflammatory bugs in the gut, they also cause leaky gut. And this was a big thing. Like when I was writing my second book, The Gut Smart Protocol, my editor was asking me, well, what is the order here? Like, how do things happen? How do things break down? And, you can't like 100% know for everyone because there's a lot of different insults that disrupt the gut microbiome. But number one, antibiotics. But number two, surprisingly, anti-inflammatory over-the-counter medications like ibuprofen. But also studies have shown, surprisingly, that even acetaminophen can cause disruptions in the gut microbiome. And so once you're breaking down the ecosystem, an ecosystem that has been designed to live in symbiosis and stimulate the production of mucus, then that starts to break down. The mucus layer breaks down. You start getting more invasive, inflammatory gut bugs closer to the gut lining, and then they start causing inflammation, breaking down of the mucus of the tight junctions. And there's different pathways to that. Like if you're traveling in Southeast Asia and you get a food poisoning there, maybe with a Campylobacter that produces something called cytolethal distending toxin. They've shown in studies that the cytolethal distending toxin gets absorbed into the cell that line the gut, and it also breaks down the cellular structure and even can cause an autoimmune condition where your body actually produces antibodies to one of the proteins, vinculin, that is part of the cell structure, and even leads to other types of autoimmunity.
Just from one exposure or one kind of
yeah, and I have
exposure.
Patients like that where everything was fine until they had that one food poisoning, probably with a Salmonella, Shigella, E. coli, Campylobacter, that produces all of these bugs have in common one thing. They produce cytolethal distending toxin. And cytolethal distending toxin can disrupt the tight junctions independent of zonulin, which is the signal that controls gut permeability. So once you get one of these infections, that I've seen people develop chronic gut issues after having one of these infections. Obviously, that's not the most common pathway. Like the most common pathway is antibiotics.
So, and once this starts happening, right, like our immune system starts in our gut. So then many other things. I was just listening to another book today, which is talking about once you have one autoimmune disease, you're like, I don't know, 4 times more likely. I don't know what the number is, but significantly more likely to come down with other autoimmune diseases. So this is really something that we've got to try and take care of. Like this is a lot of your focus now, right?
I mean, the gut is a command central for the immune system, and it's quite fascinating because we also have bacteria that are secreting something called polysaccharide A. So if we call endotoxin as like the evil brother or the wicked witch of the West, polysaccharide A is the good witch of the North. So when polysaccharide A gets absorbed, it actually stimulates a receptor on dendritic cells and tells the dendritic cells to go and tell undifferentiated T cells to turn into T regulatory cells that come in and they control the immune response. So the problem with autoimmunity is that you don't have enough Treg cells, your immune system starts going renegade and it doesn't know how to turn off. And a lot of that programming, fascinatingly, is actually happening at the gut border between the gut microbiome and our immune system and our things like dendritic cells, which are one type of white blood cell, but also programming T cells directly. All of that is being controlled by the gut microbiome. So I sometimes say that the gut is command central for our immune system.
Mm.
If you want to fix your immunity, you've got to start with your gut, and especially not just the gut lining, but also working on diversifying the gut microbiome. And we don't have a lot of studies on this, but there is one really good study done at Stanford University. It wasn't a big cohort of people. It was about 18 in each group. But they separated people into a high fiber diet versus a high fermented foods diet. And what they found, and they were looking at 19 different inflammatory markers, including markers of cytotoxicity, stuff like that. And they found that if and when you increase microbial diversity in the gut, you reduce not one, not two, not three, but all 19 inflammatory markers drop. And the pathway to that was actually more the fermented foods than the fiber-rich foods. But fiber did something really important, because I think it could be misleading to say, okay, this study now says that it's better to eat fermented foods, forget about the fiber. But that's not really the story there, because what they found was that the fiber modulated the way the immune system behaves. So you kind of need both. And fiber could either upregulate or downregulate the immune system, depending on your underlying gut microbiome diversity. So if you have low diversity, fiber is going to actually overactivate your immune system. But if you have high diversity and then add fiber, fiber is going to help control and regulate the immune response.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So as we're talking about kind of stomach problems, a thing that we think about often associate with stomach problems is acid reflux. And I know that you've got some content, the truth behind acid reflux, and that it's not exactly what people think it is. So what really is going on with acid reflux?
Yeah, I call it the acid reflux lie. And why drugs don't work. Because most people are being put on lifetime proton pump inhibitors or antacid medications to treat acid reflux. And really, for the majority of people, it's not an overproduction of acid. It's actually an underproduction of acid that's causing the reflux, because you're just not digesting your food. So the stomach is filling up with fluid trying to break that protein, that steak that you just ate, or that chicken, and it's not breaking down, so the stomach just keeps pumping more juice in there, and then some of that acid just gets up into the esophagus and causes a sensation of excess acid. But it's actually that your stomach doesn't have the digestive strength to break down that food fast enough, which should be around 30 minutes, so that it can move down into the small intestine and continue its path of getting broken down and absorbed.
I had also heard that whatever the valve is, right, that separates our esophagus from the stomach is also acid sensitive. And if it doesn't sense enough acid in the stomach, then it also doesn't work properly. Or like, is that kind of all tied?
There's a number of factors that are all working together. Because this is also really interesting, that patients that don't make enough stomach acid and don't digest their protein well, it's hard for them to know when they are full. So they tend to overeat. And part of that is the signaling that happens, that as protein breaks down, it releases amino acids. And some of those amino acids are used as signals to then tell the brain that you are full. So without that signaling, then you eat too much. So now your stomach is too full. You're not breaking the food down quick enough. You don't have enough acid. And then, yes, it weakens the lower esophageal sphincter. Also, magnesium deficiency is connected to esophageal sphincter tone, and a lot of people are magnesium deficient.
You've already mentioned coffee. a problem, right? Especially if you're drinking it out of these plastic cups, interrupting your kind of mucus layer. You have a coffee, Happy Gut Coffee. I have a bag of it here. I've tried it. I also listening to you speak with Wendy Myers. I have to admit I'm lazy and end up using cups like so just quick cups, so I do use a French press every now and then, which I also learned is maybe not the best for some reasons. Talk about like, why'd you come up with the coffee? What are you looking to accomplish with the coffee? You know, there's a 1,000 coffee brands. That's probably an underestimate, but what are you looking to accomplish with your coffee, and why'd you come out with it?
Couple of things. One is meeting people where they're at,
Mm.
and really, I just came to realize that it's the one habit that people just don't know how much it could be damaging their health, not just from the microplastics from the exposure, but coffee being one of the top 10 pesticide sprayed crops on the planet. And then contamination with mold, mycotoxins, ochratoxin A. I've seen that disrupt patients' health, causing headaches, mental fog. And then you take them off of that and put them on clean coffee, and it changes their health. So it's really like meeting people where they're
Well,
at.
talk,
And
talk, talk a little bit about that, right? So you see patients, you're seeing patients that,
yeah,
and one point it just dawns on you, hey, let me switch your coffee, or is that pretty early on? Like how do you get to like, I'm your doctor, and here's the thing you need to do: change your coffee.
it's usually part of a very complex intake that involves looking at mycotoxins on a toxicity profile and seeing what comes up, and seeing if there are any grain-based, coffee-based molds that might be coming up, and then matching that result with their behavior. Like, hey,
Mm.
what do you do? Oh, I stop at Starbucks every day on the way to work. Well, look, this is what we picked up on your test. This is what I think is happening. And I think this is one of many factors,
Mm.
because it's never just that is affecting your health. But just to come back to your question about why the coffee, it was a combination of things. It was the opportunity presented itself. I've always loved coffee. Coffee is a big part of Cuban culture. It was a big part
Certainly.
of my upbringing. It was a big part of our hospitality. Like if anybody, any guests arrived in the house, one of the first things that was asked is, would you like a Cuban coffee? And we would make it with one of those traditional on the stove mocha pots. And so part of it is just kind of bring me back to my upbringing, 70s, something that makes people happy, but also if I can transform a daily micro habit that actually has a big effect on your health, then I'm making a big difference in people's lives. And so many people out there are drinking coffee that's bad for them. It's causing acid reflux, it's disrupting the gut microbiome and causing more havoc than helping. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of different brands out there. I think that our coffee is excellent tasting, and I think that's part of the difference. It's not just a low acid, gut friendly, mold free, mycotoxin free, pesticide free coffee. It's also the flavor. And for me, flavor is also very important as part of the experience, like bringing people together, community. You know, one thing I realized, like while I was in Europe for 5 weeks, and just went to a lot of different coffee shops and experienced the coffee culture in Europe in contrast to the United States. By and large, there are no to-go cups. People
Mm.
get the coffee in a ceramic cup and they drink it right there. And you sit, you're not rushed. Here, we're just going in, we're getting our coffee, and off we go. And there's, it just speaks a lot to the difference in how we hold our nervous system. Just coming back to what I was talking about in the beginning, and we didn't talk a lot about, but like nervous system regulation, and part of the reason that people don't digest well, and the reason that people have low stomach acid is low vagal tone, high stress, low vagal tone. They're not in a parasympathetic state. And even if they think, like, I can't tell you how many high functioning people I have here in New York City that tell me that in here they're not stressed, but their bodies are behaving like they're stressed. And I think there's two places, like you might not feel the stress mentally, but your body is never going to lie. Your body's going to tell you the truth. Even when you're like saying, nope, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed at all. I'm like, a lot of times I'm educating people on what their body is really saying to them. And a lot of times people's bodies are saying, I am stressed AF.
Out of
And
my mind.
yeah.
Absolutely. So in your book, right, you talk the Gut Smart protocol. You talk about kind of a personalized approach. Talk a little bit about what people are going to find in that book, and then like where it breaks down. I listened to the book. It was a fantastic book, so I would highly encourage people to get the book.
Well, first, I will start with saying it's my second book, but it's the book that I would have wanted to write from the very beginning. But you couldn't, because I needed to have all the experiences that I had had. I wanted a book that recognized the fact that no two guts are the same. And as a result, you can't have just one diet protocol for everybody. And that came down to personalizing it with what I call the Gut Smart quiz, that looks at not just gut symptoms, but symptoms throughout your body that could be affected by the gut through the mechanism of leaky gut. So I ask a bunch of questions. People get a score from that classifies them as mild, moderate, or severe. And based on that score, I tell them what foods are in, what foods are out. And it's kind of like a self-experiment too. It's like a lot of it, I talk about listening to your body, like really slowing down, listening, keeping a journal of your symptoms, like really tuning into how food really affects your body and how you react to food. And then there's a section, there's 65 recipes that I teamed up with a chef who's one of my soul sisters from across the world. She's an Australian author, and made some really great recipes. But honestly, the favorite part of that book for me is the end of the book, which is called Turbocharging Your Results. And it's all about the vagus nerve. It's all about how to rewire the nervous system, how to create more calm, more of a parasympathetic state, bringing in mindfulness into eating, but also have breath work, meditations. And always, I know that people want to know, like, what do I do for my gut? How do I eat? What supplements do I take? In this book, I don't talk about supplements because I wanted it to not feel like I'm trying to sell people on supplements. I wanted people to see that a lot of this can be done through diet and mindset, and hopefully also take away that nervous system regulation and getting into that parasympathetic state, ventral vagal state, is probably one of the most important things that you can do for your health. And in fact, if you could start there, because you can't heal a stressed out body. So for me, if you can start there, would be great. But it's hard to convince people to do that, especially when they're really sick. And you need to also address diet, and you need to start to work on fixing the gut lining and the microbiome. So when people work with me one-on-one, I'm weaving all of these things in at the same time, and also working on mindset and stuff like that, because you just can't out diet and you can't out supplement a stressed out body. You just can't trump it. I've seen it so many times. Type A personalities checking off all the boxes, like doing the right diet, taking all the supplements, and yet still not feeling well. And it's because they're not addressing the elephant in the room, which is their whacked out nervous system that needs to be calmed down.
Yeah, I've had an interesting, the interplay is kind of amazing, because there are also some conditions, leaky gut can be one of them, that lead to you actually having a hard time changing your mindset, right? So, I love to ask the question, which one's more important, mindset or whatever, supplements or, getting the gut right or whatever. And sometimes I usually lean on, if you don't have the right mindset to change your diet, then you're not going to change your diet and you're not going to make progress or change how you exercise or change how you sleep. So mindset really is important. And then at
And
one
the gut
point,
microbiome controls your mind.
right?
And
So
and actually is kind of like regulating, like you think that the way your brain reacts to things is just here, but it's actually being programmed by signals that are coming from your gut microbiome. And I don't know if you heard this on the live that I was doing earlier today, but I was talking about a study they did in Ireland, a 4-week study with healthy volunteers, no psychotherapy, but they did an initial perceived stress score to see where they stood in stress. And then all they did was tell them to change their diet. One group was the control group, which was just told to eat the traditional Irish food pyramid and avoid processed foods, excess sugar. But then the other group was given very specific guidance on how much fiber to eat, how many fermented foods to incorporate. And in the 4-week period, they did a before and after stool analysis, and they found the fiber and fermented foods group had an improvement in their gut microbiome makeup. And they also reported a 37% decrease in their perceived stress without any psychotherapy, without any type of mental health intervention. All they were doing was changing their diet. And I've seen this over and over with patients, remove refined sugars and someone who's anxious, like get them off of refined sugars, get them off of inflammatory foods, get them eating more fermented foods. And then you can start to calm the mind, and then you can work on the mind gut connection, gut brain. But I think that study really speaks to the fact that there is more to our thoughts than what we believe, and they're partly being controlled by our gut microbiome. I think it would be a funny meme to have like the inside of the brain of a person and have little gut bugs sitting on a control panel, almost like a spaceship, and they're just kind of like pulling the levers, because in some ways they are programming us.
yeah, absolutely. There's so many cases where bacteria and viruses are literally controlling species, different animal species, and I think that kind of rolls with us. I love the idea of the control panel. All right, so we're about to get into our wrap-up questions. Just want to make sure we will certainly give you the opportunity to kind of share where people can reach out to you. Is there anything else maybe that I didn't cover so far?
God, I feel like there's always so much to talk about.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about. But I think I feel like, is there anything that your audience really loves? We didn't really talk about longevity in the gut,
Yeah.
and that's something that they've actually looked at. They've looked at the gut microbiome in centenarians. And what sets them apart is that they actually have gut bugs that fight inflammation and reduce inflammation.
Mm.
And they have less inflammatory gut bugs. So there's something to be said about that. And then if you kind of go backwards from there, what is it that creates that? Centenarians, they're not avoiding all lectin-rich foods like Gundry wants you to. So if you're in Sicily, like you're eating tomatoes, you're eating lectin, but you're also outside, you're going for walks, you're getting exposed to the dirt, you're around animals, you're in multi-generational household where your microbiome is mixing with the younger microbiome of your grandchildren. And all of that plays a very powerful influence. But I think we're going to look more and more into how the microbiome also relates to aging. And I think that we're going to find that the microbiome plays a very significant role, and it's all related to everything that we've been talking about. The inflammation, the LPS, the leaky gut, the breakdown of the mucus layer, but all these pieces and regulation of the nervous system, creating community, like being in connection with others, that also helps us be in more of an oxytocin state, more relaxed, feeling more love. connected with the love for ourselves and others. And that plays a very strong role in longevity. But I think it ties back to the composition of the gut microbiome and how that affects aging.
I think it's fascinating, right? Because there is this well-documented, we'll call it decline in the microbiome. What's driving the decline, and are there some easy ways to fix it? And I think we're with AI and how much medical information is, how much more is being produced these days, we're going to have these answers a lot. I mean, even, it's incredibly complex, right? Like how many different types of strains of bacteria are in your gut. It's off the charts, but we're going to have AI is going to help us process that information. So yeah, thank you for tying that to longevity. That was supposed to be my job, but thank you very much. All right, Dr. Pedre, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
That's a really great question, because God, I look at the Brian Johnsons of the world who say they want to live forever. What would this planet be if everybody lived forever? I just think of the resources on this planet and its ability to house this many people. But also, I question whether I really want to stay here for that long. My grandfather lived to 99, and he was quite happy. And when he went, it was a very rapid deterioration at the end. So regardless of whatever age I live to, I hope that the end is just a sudden rapid decline and then goodbye, rather than what many people do, which is this very slow deterioration over time. So for me, I think more important than lifespan is my health span. And yeah, in my mind, like, I would love to live to 100. Do I need to be like an ego base, like 120 or 180 years old? I'm not sure. I don't know that I would desire that, But one thing I do know is that regardless of my age, I want to stay engaged and interested and always learning new things. So I think I connect with my grandfather, I was kind of like a second son for him. He was my dad's dad. And he used to take me fishing to the pier when I was like 5, 6 years old. He was 77, 78. And he used to tell me that age is in your head, that you are as old as you believe. And he was just vibrant. He still was working for my dad at 95 years old. So if I can be vibrant like that and live to 100 and then just go quickly in the end, I'll be happy. I don't need to beat any records here.
All right, so I jotted down 100, right? Because 99, maybe 1 year,
Yeah.
you don't need to beat Grandpa, but it's certainly a nice round number. How long do you think humans can live?
That's a really great question. I mean, there are outliers, right, that live to 105, 110 without doing all of this crazy, expensive, multi-million-dollar biohacking. So I think there is that potential. But the foundation for that starts today. You don't live to 100 by suddenly deciding when you're on 10 different medications at 80 years old that you want to fix your life. You live long and healthy by deciding in your earlier years, 30s, 40s, that you're going to make changes and you're going to live your life from a philosophy of health.
There is some contraindications there, which are Jean Clement. She's the oldest lived human, right? 122, who stopped smoking when she could no longer see to light her cigarette. Not recommended practice, but
Not a recommended
I hear
practice.
you. Yeah.
But I do think that, and I don't know how you feel about this. I'm curious to know what you feel about all of the extensive biohacking and all the money spent on that. I think there's value to certain things, and I think there's value to understanding very key targeted interventions that make a difference for the body, especially preserving mitochondria, because mitochondria are longevity. But what's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, well, I think anytime what you focus on expands, right? And so if you have the money and you spend the money, that what you're focusing on with the money is going to expand. Like, so I think you probably are extending your life, by buying whatever the technology is, right? I think there are better ways. There's Brian Johnson spending $2 million a year. You've got Dave Pascoe spending $15,000 a year, including food and trips to biohacking conferences, right?
Okay.
And he's neck and neck in this kind of regenerative Olympics. And so I don't think you need to go there. I think Brian Johnson is also trying to accomplish something different, which is like to really push the extreme.
Yeah.
And he's got the budget to do it. But kind of generally, like if it makes you happy and like you're not going into debt for these things, like, yeah, push this envelope.
But happiness first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
happiness first and still being able to live.
Yeah.
So I would ask my grandfather, what's the secret? And he would say everything in moderation. He never did anything too extreme. He also ate a lot of sardines. He loves sardines. So that could be part of the reason his brain stayed so sharp to the end. But I have that example. So there's a part of me that thinks that the biggest thing that's going to affect how old we get is really how we live, our lifestyle, how much stress we hold in our bodies, and the mindset that we live by. I think those things are cheap. They're not expensive. Breathing is free. Like you have a mechanism here for extending your life just by taking deep breaths, regulating your nervous system. So I'm a big believer in doing things that are more organic with targeted interventions that have positive effects without going extreme, because I still also want to enjoy life.
So this kind of leads into my next question. So what are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, for longevity and a long health span that you would share?
I'm going to say starting your day with some type of intentional activity. For me, it's either gratitude or sitting in meditation and breathing. I think that's super important.
Excellent. Yep.
We also know autophagy is very important. Doesn't mean you have to fast every day, but having at least 1-2 days a week where you start eating later, you do a longer overnight fast. So let your body equalize, let your receptors reset, let your body process out old damaged mitochondria. So I think that's also a very important habit. But also getting outside, getting in the sun, connecting with nature, getting grounded. I think that's super important.
Excellent. Are there 1 or 2 things that you can think of that people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I'm going to say going extreme on the cold plunging and all that. You can actually run your mitochondria too fast. And one thing that I've learned recently from working with a company called MeScreen on mitochondrial function testing is that our mitochondria, healthy mitochondria, are like a Goldilocks. You want to be able to upregulate them, but you also want to be able to downregulate them. And if they're running too fast at baseline from over biohacking, too much cold plunging, too much intermittent fasting, all that, then you're generating more reactive oxygen species at baseline, and you may actually be working against yourself. So yeah, I think that's something that, because Americans, if a little's good, then a lot is better. And I think we need to kind of recalibrate that and find what is this sweet spot in the middle. And just being privy to just conversations with MeScreen where they've tested a lot of biohackers, and they've told me that it's actually the minority who have really healthy mitochondria, and a lot of them, they're running their mitochondria too hard.
And this kind of goes back to your grandfather's all things in moderation, right? Like
Yeah,
all, including biohacking. Dr.
exactly.
Pedre, how can people contact you?
They can find me on Instagram at Dr. Pedre, DrPedre. I have two websites. One is to work directly with me one-on-one, and people can schedule a free discovery call there at pedremd.com, pedremd.com. And then they can learn everything about our products, the coffee, lots of free information, blog posts on a lot of different gut health topics at happygutlife.com.
And that's where they would find it's the acid reflux lie is there, or we'll
We can
get a
give you
separate link for that.
we'll give you a link for that where you can post it you can put it in the show notes so
Yeah.
people can download our free ebook that's called the Acid Reflux Lie, Why Drugs Don't Work and Natural Remedies to Fix It.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
We are about to launch on Amazon. We're going to
That's
have our
exciting.
coffee on Amazon. We'll have our digestive enzymes and our leaky gut advantage powder, which is a vanilla flavored leaky gut powder, which goes great with coffee, by the way. So that is the big project. I'm also going to be at the Ultimate Wellness event at the Faena in Miami Beach, Florida in September.
We'll see you there.
Super excited for that. We'll be exhibiting, sampling the coffee, and I'll be on one of the panels. So I'm just excited for that, excited for just the clients that come in, the people that I'm helping one-on-one transform their health. And just getting more people to realize that the gut is the foundation for everything. If you want to build a house, you first build a strong foundation. If you want to build excellent health, you start with your gut.
That is the foundation. Excellent. Well, you can find him on IG, Dr. Pedre. That's Dr. Pedre, pedremd.com and happygutlife.com. Dr. Pedre, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.